Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Victory Road World Cup of Pokemon VGC, sponsored by Elgato. My name is Meaghan. I am here again with Lou Chromie. I am so excited that you and I get to be together on the casting desk once again. I know we had such a blast last week, and we had a really great match right before this one. I know it was a fun Regieleki match that I got the pleasure of casting over. I felt a little bit bad. I wanted you to see it, but this upcoming match that we have, I am extremely excited for. It is, of course, the United States versus Australia, but both of the players are incredible.
Yeah, I mean, when I was doing the draw with Lee, when we pulled this particular group, it just, to look at it to know that it's going to be amazing. So it's really nice to be able to kind of commentate over one of these matches, and particularly with yourself as well. It's always nice being able to have these sort of weeks being able to cast together.
So sweet. I know. But again, even like this, our next match is Gavin Michaels from the United States and Meaghan Rattle. So both of them have had incredible finishes. Meaghan did incredibly well at the 2019 World Championships. And the United States and Australia, it's 3-2 right now. So if the United States if Gavin wins, that puts them at a bare minimum of a draw. So Meaghan has to win to keep her team, keep them in fighting contention, keep that tie at 3-3, kind of make it anybody's game. Try and make sure that there isn't an opportunity for the United States to win. So a really competitive set here. Lots of interesting teams. Mogar's team with that Raichu obviously stands out to me. And then you've also got Henry as well, Henry Rich, running that Araquanid, which I love. I love the Wide Garden Series 10. I love that being used. And with Amanda Buzz. And I know that I'm even seeing some Sun teams, with the Charizard, that hasn't been used too much without the Dynamax or the Gigantamax ability.
Yeah, there's a super nice mix of restrictors that you can see along here. Of course, you've got those classic, unsurprising Pokemon, like we see some Xerneas, Shadow Calyrex, the Groudon as well. But I think what's interesting as well is you've got the Ice Rider Calyrex in there as well as the Lunala, one of my absolute favorite Pokemon. So it's amazing to see it being utilized. And again, in that kind of pairing with the Araquanid, a Pokemon that took me a very long time to say correctly and to properly be able to pronounce. But it certainly is one of those Pokemon that can come in, like you say, with Wide Guard and then do a really nice heavy hit. It's nice to see kind of the diversity that's coming through here in Series 10. A few really unique Pokemon choices.
Yeah, absolutely. I am excited. I know we saw in that preview what Meaghan and Gavin both have in the little break between this match. I know Meaghan is running a really nice team, definitely a little bit different, and then Gavin is running one as well. We'll definitely, when we cut over to where their team preview is, it will be great because I know that both teams are great. This is what I was excited about. Meaghan is running a Sun team, a Venodon team, like we've said, with Stakataka, Mandibuzz, Tapu Fini, and Incineroar. So Trick Room options here that Stakataka loves to be put in Trick Room. That sleep from the Venusaur is just crippling, and it is something that you either love it or you hate it or you play it and you feel both ways. So...
Yeah, I mean, Mandibuzz is a really nice pick on there. Having like the overcoat ability can really help kind of destroy your opponent's strategy a lot of the time. Being able to kind of protect yourself from sort of like weather conditions and sort of the spores and things like that as well does just make Mandibuzz that great Pokemon to either be a switch in or a problem for your opponent to have to deal with. We've seen it utilized greatly in the past, also at World Championships in past, so really nice to see it here in action. And like you say, very interesting team, and I do love that classic combination of Sun with Groudon and Venusaur. Please don't come for me, I absolutely love weather modes, so it's great to be able to see it here in play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Mandibuzz is going to be especially useful too, because Gavin's team, whenever we take a jump to look at that, has an Amoonguss on it. And Amoonguss, as we know, loves to go for Spore. So it's not going to be able to Spore something like the Mandibuzz here on Meaghan's side, while also having that Tapu Fini and that Misty Terrain, I think is going to be really helpful as well. Maybe trying to mitigate if there are any sort of dragon type moves on the opponent's side, but he doesn't have any. He does have a Zacian, so that the Zacian there with the Incineroar, the Rillaboom, the Regieleki, the Amoonguss, and the Urshifu. So a bit more of a standard team here. The Amoonguss, like I said, might struggle with the overcoat ability on that Mandibuzz, but that Regieleki could be sitting pretty comfortably here as well. Urshifu, Rillaboom, and Incineroar are Pokemon that we see constantly, but we know exactly what they do, but they're so good at it that it's almost hard to not put them on your team.
Yeah, exactly. They've become that, again, you hear me talk about it a lot, but that fire, water, grass core is so standard and so utilized when you have that triangle where you can switch in your Incineroars and your Rillabooms and utilize them greatly to then be able to kind of counteract your opponent. And we see them used so well. And of course, Regieleki, we've got to talk about Regieleki. The thing I like about Gavin's side is you've got those kind of both speed modes. You've got the slow and steady Amoonguss, then you've got the really happy and zappy Regieleki there. So you can do so much depending on what your opponent wants to do, whether it comes to speed or comes down to type advantage as well.
And Zappy, I absolutely love that face. You know, someone else that's a little happy but just fast, you know, is that Venusaur with that sun from the Groudon. So, you know, if Meaghan is going for that sun mode early, trying to get the speed just to kind of keep up with the Pokemon on Gavin's side instead of going for something like a Trick Room mode, you know, they're gonna have to keep that sun up. Thankfully, Gavin isn't running something like a Kyogre or something where he can change the weather. So we'll have to see, you know, if Meaghan does capitalize on the fact that there isn't gonna be something with a, you know, a drizzle switch in, something like, you know, even a Kyogre. Or we've seen a couple of Pelipper in some of the team previews throughout the World Cup itself. We're going to see, though, Gavin brings Incineroar and Amoonguss, so this feels very Ultra Series to me so far with this lead, and then Groudon and Venusaur. So, like we said, that Sun mode, Incineroar is going to be pretty happy to be in the Sun, too, if it goes for something like a Flare Blitz, and then 2 different sleep-inducing Pokemon on either side.
Yeah, I think the items here are going to be quite critical as well to start scouting out in this game 1. You know, for example, we've seen Incineroar often run a berry item. But we did get to see the White Herb activation there on the Groudon. Really good information there for Gavin to know. So that Intimidate is going to be null and void. It can still apply a lot of good offensive pressure. But whether or not the Incineroar is running something like a safety goggles is something that the Venusaur does have to worry about potentially. Of course, Amoonguss and Venusaur, they kind of counteract each other in this situation, but we've been able to get a little sneak peek of what Meaghan might have in the back there, and I think Incineroar is going to be a critical Pokemon here for Meaghan, going to be able to apply a lot of Intimidate down to those physical attackers that Gavin opts to have. In this current situation, though, I think bringing in the Tapu Fini is great because you can stop Spore from going down onto your Groudon and apply some water-type pressure to the opposing Incineroar.
Yeah, that Incineroar, though, will be going for a Fake Out into the Tapu Fini slot, so there could be a pretty strong Precipice Blades here, but instead we get the substitute from the Groudon, getting that extra substitute for that 25%. Amoonguss goes for a Spore. Groudon gets that Protective Mist from that Misty Terrain from the Tapu Fini, which is a great switch in, especially not having to deal with that Fake Out on the Groudon themselves.
Absolutely love this play by Meaghan. I mean, if you're Gavin, you have to absolutely respect that there could potentially be a Sleep Powder coming out from the Venusaur into that Incineroar. So going for the Fake Out into it not only stops that from happening, but also does break a potential Focus Sash. And Meaghan was able to capitalize on that beautifully by setting up a substitute.
Yeah, the Rillaboom switching in here, though, for Gavin, getting a different Fake Out user onto the field. Gets that Grassy Surge up, though, so gonna counteract the Misty Surge that was on the field with that Misty Terrain. Tapu Fini goes for that Natured Madness, though, gonna get that 50% from the Amoonguss, gonna take it down perfectly to half health. It does show that it is an odd number there, I believe. And then Groudon goes for that Precipice Blades onto both Pokemon. Not enough to knock out the Amoonguss because it is so bulky, and that Rillaboom just takes a little bit of chip damage. The Spore, though, from the Amoonguss onto the Tapu Fini is gonna put it right to sleep now that that Misty Terrain is off the field.
Yeah, not something we see every day. It's a Tapu Fini actually being able to take a Status Affliction. But that was beautiful synergy there from Gavin, being able to override that terrain, knowing that Spore, if it was able to connect, if Amoonguss was able to hang on, would be able to put the Tapu Fini to sleep. And the one thing Meaghan does still have in order to utilize with that Tapu Fini is the switch ability. If you switch Tapu Fini out and switch it back in, it doesn't matter if it's asleep, the Misty Terrain will still activate. So you have that protection from those spores in the future. But as it stands at the moment, Tapu Fini is pretty much null and void, can't do anything offensive here, and it is in fear of that opposing Rillaboom. Those grass type attacks will certainly pack a strong punch against it, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Meaghan switching out this Tapu Fini. Groudon, however, looking to still be in a really safe position behind its substitute there. You know, Amoonguss isn't going to be able to take another attack from it. Rillaboom can try and attack into it, but that substitute is going to be able to buy Groudon that one turn of time. So Meaghan really does have all the utility options with Groudon, and certainly can be in kind of a defensive pressure situation here.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting too, though, is that Meaghan brought both the Venusaur and the Tapu Fini, so she's going to have to pay really close attention to what Pokemon she has available to her if she wants to set up something like a Spore from her Venusaur, but does instead bring that Tapu Fini back, brings that Venusaur out into this grassy terrain, so if it does go for something like a Sleep Powder here, it is going to be able to get that off. Groudon instead goes for a Protect behind that substitute, so trying to keep itself on the field, get this HP regain from this grassy terrain. The Rillaboom goes for a U-turn into the Venusaur slot, does a pretty good chunk of damage here, about a third of the HP that Venusaur has, and then switches back for whatever Gavin has in the back. Now this could be that Incineroar again getting some more fake out pressure, but instead it's the Zacian. So the Zacian is going to be able to put a lot of pressure on if it can take care of this Groudon, and it does get that Intrepid Sword boost, so it is getting that attack damage raise. The Amoonguss here goes for a Pollen Puff into the Venusaur on Meaghan's side, gets a little bit more HP, gets it right down to under half, but the Venusaur then gets that HP back up from the grassy terrain that all of these Pokemon are benefiting from at the moment, and that Groudon is really loving having behind that substitute.
Yeah, Venusaur does make it onto the field, but not exactly unscathed, does take a significant chunk of damage. And I do like that protect actually from Meaghan. I was saying you could go a lot more offensive, but actually, if you weren't able to KO the Amoonguss with the Precipice Blades, maybe it was to miss, then you would hate to have had the kind of grass type move from the Rillaboom picking up the KO against the substitute and then falling victim to a Spore. So at least the protect buys Meaghan time to bring that Tapu Fini back onto the field and be able to either reset terrain or really give the opportunity to target down at that Amoonguss that has just left the field.
Yeah, Amoonguss does switch out for the Rillaboom on Gavin's side, while a Weather Ball goes into the Zacian, not able to do any damage here with that Protect that Zacian used, while a Precipice Blades goes into the Zacian, also protecting, but will hit the Rillaboom. So this was a great switch by Gavin, not wanting to let that Amoonguss go down too early, especially having that Pollen Puff is a great move for a partner, especially something like a Zacian that can't really heal itself, isn't carrying items that would allow it to heal itself, besides having this grassy terrain. It allows it to stay on the field as long as it can, especially after it gets that one Intrepid Sword boost. But, you know, instead, this Venusaur taking a little bit more damage, but, or taking no damage this turn either, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, Amoonguss with regenerator ability, sorry, I completely stumbled my words then. Able to go back out and, you know, regain a little bit of HP here. Groudon, however, is still sitting so pretty behind that substitute. Fake Out going down into the Venusaur as Zacian sets up a substitute of its own.
Yeah, 2 restricteds, 2 substitutes here, so that is going to see exactly how much damage. No, Groudon goes for the P-Blades, no misses on either of the Pokemon on Gavin's side. Should probably break that substitute here as long as it is done correctly, especially with that super effectiveness, so that is a pretty good substitute, only taking the 25% HP from the substitute instead of the absolutely massive amount of damage it would take. But now the sun disappears, so now this Venusaur isn't going to be going as fast.
That's the thing, you've got to keep an eye on the sun turns, and, you know, Meaghan would have to switch out the Groudon in order to bring that back onto the field. Having the Zacian here and exposed, again, the problem with the sun is we saw the Weather Ball being revealed from that Venusaur, and being able to use the sun to convert that into a Fire-type move certainly would be able to apply a lot of pressure to either of Gavin's Pokemon at the moment, but it's the Zacian that you really want to get rid of here, particularly as I believe it's still got its +1 from Intrepid Sword. We haven't been able to see an Incineroar coming in and Intimidator as of yet, so it is going to be a formidable pressure on the battlefield.
Yeah, the Grassy Glide, though, from the Rillaboom goes into the Groudon, fading the substitute that the Groudon had, so a really great move early on. The Zacian, once again, going for a substitute, taking a little bit more of its HP in for its own substitute here. Venusaur goes for a Sludge Bomb onto the Rillaboom, though, and that is going to be enough to knock it out, so not going to have to worry about something like a priority Grassy Glide, getting that substitute out of the way for this Groudon. This Groudon again goes for a Precipice Blades, but does miss the Zacian after it sets up that substitute, so a really nice evasion there for Gavin.
Yeah, the substitute tides have turned. Gavin has been released from the substitute and is now out on the battlefield. It is at full HP at the moment, but the Zacian is able to hide its way behind one for now, meaning that unless Gavin is able to pick up a KO against it, there really isn't anything that the Venusaur can do to apply offensive pressure to that Zacian while it's behind the substitute. So really it's going to come down to Groudon to try and break free from it. Gavin, however, has a great opportunity to bring in that Incineroar, though, to throw down and Intimidate against the Groudon. So even if it is able to find its mark with those Precipice Blades, it will be dealing a lot less damage. This could potentially be an opportunity to switch out that Groudon, not only to reset that Intimidate, but to reset the Sun to help out that Venusaur a little bit more. And you could bring in that Tapu Fini from the back. Even though it's sleeping, it sets terrain out on the field, which, to be honest, isn't really going to do too much, but the one thing it will do is allow that Groudon to have that safe switch, and you might potentially be sacrificing a Tapu Fini, but actually it's going to be the Venusaur that's leaving the field.
Yeah, the Venusaur does swap out for the Tapu Fini. The Groudon does not, but it does get... Actually, the Groudon does, apologies. It just was the faster switch of the two with that Venusaur. The Incineroar instead coming in here, getting that Intimidate off onto the opponent's Incineroar here, but not hitting the Zacian through that substitute. So the Zacian instead going for a Behemoth Blade, gonna get a really good chunk of damage off onto either one of these Pokemon, really. It instead goes into the Tapu Fini, which does not love taking that, but it is asleep, so it's not like it can really do a whole lot else on this switch in. Incineroar going for a parting shot here into the Tapu Fini slot as well, so it's gonna lower the attack and the special attack of Tapu Fini and send it back for another Pokemon on Gavin's side. Meaghan, though, like you said, I really love that they can change the sun here. They didn't have something like a Swords Dance up on that Groudon if it is running something like that, so it wasn't heartbreaking to switch out, and then the Amoonguss comes in for Gavin.
Really nice play here though from Gavin, being able to bring that Amoonguss in and pivot in so beautifully, because now Amoonguss has the opportunity to go for those Rage Powders and protect the Zacian even further from any fire type moves that this Incineroar wants to deal out. You really don't have to worry about the Tapu Fini at the moment. It's still going to be asleep. Zacian's going to be able to deal with it really easily with another one of those Behemoth Blades, and with redirection potential coming out from Amoonguss, Zacian's going to be very happy just sitting behind its substitute for now. Ultimately, if you're Meaghan, you need to find a way to remove this Amoonguss as quickly as possible, so that you can then focus down and deal with the Zacian. And there we go, there's the Rage Powder.
Yeah, that Rage Power going to make all single target moves attack the Amoonguss instead, freeing up the station from a lot of damage. It goes for a Sacred Sword against the Incineroar, does a really good amount of damage that brings it down to under 25% of its total HP, but Incineroar is going to be eating a berry here. Going to take some time to regain a little bit of health, and we'll see exactly. It was a citrus berry there. Tapu Fini still asleep, not waking up this turn, so both of the Pokemon here really low health, but the Flare Blitz goes into the Amoonguss here, which is actually holding that berry that will prevent it from taking, will only allow it to take a quarter of the damage from the super effective move, that Akka Berry, and is able to live this hit. So this Amoonguss, once again, at low HP, but it's still in a pretty safe position here.
Absolutely love that there from Gavin, you know, knowing you're going to be redirecting to take a potential Flare Blitz, but also knowing you have the capability to do so thanks to the Akka Berry. Really good information though for Meaghan in this particular game one to know going forward. However, it does still pose the problem that Amoonguss is on the field. Meaghan needs to find a way to deal with it so that you can target down that opposing Zacian. Otherwise, Zacian, as you can see, the damage it's dealing from those Sacred Swords, from the Behemoth Blades, it really does at this point have its choice of which Pokemon it would like to KO. The one thing if you're Gavin though you have to bear in mind is if you do pick up the KO, you are giving Meaghan the opportunity to start setting up that Groudon Venusaur combination once again.
Yeah, the Rage Powder once again for the Amoonguss, and another Behemoth Blade from this Zacian into one of the Pokemon on Meaghan's side. Either one will probably be a knockout. It goes into that Incineroar, which will definitely take the Incineroar out. So no more Intimidates, no more Fake Outs from Meaghan's side, which is absolutely huge for Gavin, knowing now that if for some reason he has to swap his Zacian out, he can, and he will still get that free Intrepid Sword boost, and that won't be lowered by Intimidate anymore. And now, you know, Meaghan has to contend with the fact that this Amoonguss is still on the field, and if this Tapu Fini doesn't wake up and doesn't do something incredible to get the Amoonguss off the field, maybe carrying something like an Ice Beam, we'll have to see. Groudon is back in, though, for Meaghan, so it is going to set up the sun before that Venusaur could possibly come in.
Exactly, lots of utility options here, and you can see Meaghan is starting to scroll through her Pokemon in the bag to start setting up the position that she wants. Tapu Fini is going to leave the field here, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Venusaur joining the action with the sun in the sky. It's just whether switching in here is going to result in a KO. You want to make sure that Venusaur can come in and isn't going to fall victim to a Behemoth Blade.
Yeah, the Amoonguss, though, switches out for Gavin, so that is going to be the Incineroar brought in, lowering, getting that Intimidate off, and getting that Fake Out pressure back in. Zacian goes for that Behemoth Blade. If it goes into this Venusaur, it might not, you know, it could get knocked out here, but it goes instead into the Groudon, which also does not love taking that, gets down over half of its HP there. So that puts both of these Pokemon for Meaghan under half HP, but it does get the Precipice Blades off into both of these Pokemon, so that will break the substitute for the Zacian and will do a really good amount of damage onto the Incineroar as well. And that Incineroar does have a berry, excuse me, I spoke too soon, does have that Citrus Berry that it will eat to regain a little bit more health, so it will live at least one more Precipice Blades. It will need to at least take two to get knocked out.
Yeah, that turn went beautifully there for Meaghan. Being able to go for the Precipice Blades, despite taking the Intimidate, it was enough to break that substitute and deal some good damage to both these Pokemon. The only issue is the terrain is still active. That Misty Terrain is going to stop any Sleep Powders coming out from that Venusaur in this situation. So you're going to have to rely on the speed of Venusaur here to try and deal some good damage. Incineroar, however, does have the utility for the Fake Outs, so Venusaur's not going to be able to be the savior here, particularly with a critical hit. And the Zacian, we know, is going to be the speedier of the Restricteds.
Yeah, Zacian gets that Behemoth Blade up. That was a pretty big critical hit Fake Out too. Gets it down to under 25% of its HP, but the Groudon gets fully knocked out from this Behemoth Blade from the Zacian, so that is a absolutely huge amount of damage. Even though the Misty Terrain has now disappeared, the Tapu Fini will come back on with more Misty Terrain, so that means that this Venusaur isn't really going to be able to put anybody to sleep here, especially because Gavin can't change that terrain now that his Rillaboom has been knocked out. So now, the Venusaur here is sitting here, wants to get these Weather Balls off onto this Zacian while the sun is still up. and then maybe try and handle the rest of the Pokemon on the field, but it was faked out, so it has another turn of, you know, it has to do something big. It has to maybe get a critical hit this turn onto the Zacian, or else this is going to be a really tough go for Meaghan going forward.
Yeah, the Incineroar is going to leave the field as well for Gavin. Reserve that fake out for a little bit later on. We can see how debilitating it can be. As Amoonguss, once again, having got a little bit of HP recovery back thanks to its regenerator ability, able to jump into the fray, as Zacian does go for that protect.
Yeah, Venusaur going for the Sludge Bomb here onto the Amoonguss slot is enough to get the knockout, so that's absolutely huge. Not having to worry about that Amoonguss getting that regenerator, swapping in, swapping out anymore. So it will be Incineroar coming back onto the field for Gavin for the very last time. But that Life Orb damage means that this Venusaur is only really going to be able to do one more attack. So it has to make this last one count. This Tapu Fini still snoozing. It should wake up this turn finally. Incineroar getting that Intimidate though. But it could go for a Fake Out onto this Venusaur. And if it gets that Fake Out, this Venusaur isn't going to be able to do anything because that last bit of chip damage will be enough to knock it out. The Tapu Fini is going to have to get some, you know, could get these Muddy Waters off, could get the knockout, could get some accuracy drops. That's really Meaghan's win con here. Venusaur goes for the Protect though, so that's not going to be taking any Fake Out damage if it goes for it. Incineroar goes for the Fake Out into the protected Venusaur slot. Not going to take any damage, hang on for one more turn. The Behemoth Blade goes into the Venusaur, which was a double protect, so this Tapu Fini will wake up and get this Muddy Water off. Does not miss either of these Pokemon. You have to hope for a critical hit or an accuracy drop here on either of these Pokemon. It just does it get one? It does get the accuracy drop onto the Zacian, so that is absolutely huge, but not one onto the Incineroar.
I honestly think he spoke pretty much everything into existence there, which is really exciting to see. You know, I was thinking the Incineroar just going for the Fake Out and the Zacian going for Behemoth Blade into Tapu Fini would really just kind of write that out. And then Venusaur tends to not have, you know, dual type attack, so Incineroar Zacian on the following turn could pick up the KO against that Venusaur. But actually going for the double into Venusaur here has put Zacian at a little bit of risk, but Incineroar still going to be looking very strong, particularly with the sun in the sky as well. Not that it needs it, but it's going to be boosting up any fire type moves. But can it survive? Yes, it can from that Venusaur. It's going to KO itself in HP recoil from Life Orb.
Yeah, and the Zacian protected this turn, so Tapu Fini goes for the Muddy Water. It will hit the protected Zacian. It really has to hit this Incineroar here, which it does. So this Incineroar will be knocked out. That does mean, though, that this Zacian is against this Tapu Fini. You know, if this Zacian is running, you know, a fighting type move, it's going to be pretty comfortable into this Tapu Fini, the fairy typing here. But the steel type Behemoth Blade should be able to take out this Tapu Fini unless that accuracy drop is pivotal, in which case you have to get a couple more Muddy Waters and a couple more accuracy drops. That's really Meaghan's win con here. I want to see it happen.
I mean, the one other good thing for Tapu Fini is the sun has now left the sky, so those Muddy Waters are going to be able to deal more significant damage than they did previously. But Behemoth Blade able to break through. This is why Zacian is, you know, the legend that it literally is. It's able to power through the tough situations and pick up the KO, meaning game one is going to go to Gavin Michaels.
Yeah, that unfortunate hit of the Behemoth Blade for Meaghan, you know, wasn't able to get all the power out of that accuracy drop. You know, when the accuracy drop happens to someone else, it never seems to make a move miss, but when it happens to yourself, you miss every time. Just somehow the way that it is, at least for me. But, you know, Meaghan knew what her win con was, and she still played to it, even though she had a tough go of it, especially losing her Groudon. You know, before that Groudon was able to get any really big KOs, you know, it got one substitute up. It wasn't able to hit with a bunch of P-Blades, you know, deal with that Zacian. After that Zacian got one substitute up and was able to hold on to it, it wasn't able to sit pretty comfortably. So, you know, Gavin has a great substitute Zacian here, but Meaghan has to really change her plans.
Yeah, Meaghan has to make sure that Gavin doesn't get in a position where he's not only got Zacian and Amoonguss up on the field, but particularly that Zacian cannot be hiding behind a substitute. Having the Amoonguss there to give support, not only from the Rage Powder, but particularly having the Occa Berry, drawing in those fire type attacks that would normally be coming Zacian's way, was really pivotal there. And that really was, I think, where the match turned, where Meaghan had such good advantage with that substitute Groudon. Then it was getting a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, Gavin, though, leads the Incineroar and the Rillaboom this turn, getting two fake-out options here, while Meaghan leads the Venusaur and the Groudon. So, once again, the same lead for Meaghan here, having that option for the sleep powders here onto either of the Pokemon with that sun up, but is going to probably be dealing with a fake-out this turn. Incineroar gets that Intimidate off onto the Groudon as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of priority options here. The Incineroar can go for the Fake Out into the opposing Venusaur, stop a potential Sleep Powder in this situation. Groudon, of course, White Herb activating to reset that Intimidate, so it's not going to be wanting to switch out to reset that in particular, but the Rillaboom with its own priority is certainly going to be a formidable threat. Something like a Grassy Glide, something Groudon doesn't want to take, particularly if it maybe is the target of that Fake Out from the Incineroar. We saw Meaghan switch out the Venusaur in Game 1, possibly stands to reason that that could be the option here again in Game 2, but also if you change the terrain, then the Rillaboom won't have that priority. But Incineroar, a great switch in here from Meaghan, throwing down an Intimidate against both of these physical attackers.
Yeah, and having that opportunity for Fake Out after as well in the next turn with the Incineroar's Fake Out ability here. But the Rillaboom here goes for the Fake Out into the Groudon, which was pretty well expected. Incineroar goes for a parting shot here. It is into the Incineroar, which was that Venusaur slot, so that attack drop and the special attack drop and swapping out. Getting maybe something like that Amoonguss in if Gavin has it again. I know exactly how problematic it was, maybe able to get something like a Rage Powder, take a Flare Blitz, and then allow that Rillaboom to get a Grassy Glide, but instead it's going to be the Zacian this turn, and that Zacian's going to come in and get that Intrepid Sword boost after the Venusaur's already come onto the field.
Yeah, that's the thing. Having the Intrepid Sword boost, not having to worry about taking an Intimidate, means you are going to have that around to stay. It's interesting as well with that with the Incineroar, having its attack drop by the passing shot as well. Zacian can not worry about it too much, but with the sun in the sky, you really can't avoid any of these fire type moves, and this is where it gets interesting for Gavin. If Gavin wants to try and switch out that Rillaboom, bring the Amoonguss in, then you're in that very difficult situation that Meaghan had in Game 1, and I think adjusting here to the Tapu Fini certainly makes things interesting as you're negating the damage that Rillaboom can do.
Yeah, Tapu Fini comes in, brings that Misty Surge onto the field for the Incineroar, while the Zacian goes for that Protect here on Gavin's side. Not going to be taking any damage, but not setting up a substitute. The Heat Crash from the Groudon actually goes into the Rillaboom here, and that is enough for a one-hit knockout before it was able to do any damage because that terrain swapped. Wasn't able to get a Grassy Glide off into the Groudon like it may have wanted to. An absolutely huge turn for Meaghan.
Absolutely love this there for Meaghan, because even if that Rillaboom had decided to switch into something like the Amoonguss in the sun, that would have been dealing so much damage, and just removing that Rillaboom does mean that both the Tapu Fini and the Groudon can actually be a little bit more comfortable out here on the battlefield, particularly Tapu Fini's got its terrain. Venusaur's not in action for Meaghan, so she's not going to worry about the fact she can't Sleep Powder here. Interesting though for Gavin, it does give the utility to bring that Incineroar back into play, and that's something that Groudon's not going to want to play around with. Doesn't want to take a Fake Out and wants to reset that Intimidate that it has now unfortunately taken. Bringing in the Incineroar here as well is lovely, because you can throw down an Intimidate against that Zacian before it's able to get into a substitute.
Yeah, that Intimidate off, and the Fake Out pressure next turn as well. Incineroar on Gavin's side goes for the Fake Out into the Incineroar now on Meaghan's. That was the Groudon, while the Behemoth Blade from Gavin onto probably the Incineroar as well, which it is from the Zacian there. While the Nature's Madness from Tapu Fini is going to do 50 HP or 50% of the HP that this Zacian has, which will pretty comfortably, I believe, put it in range for a P-Blades, which shows like the synergy between Tapu Fini and Groudon. If it's able to get those big chunks of HP with that Nature's Madness, which puts pretty much any Pokemon in range of a Precipice Blades.
And it's really nice as well, because you're limiting how many substitute that Zacian has the potential to be able to set up here, and does make it a little bit riskier for Gavin, because you don't want to be in a situation where you take damage and then don't actually have enough HP to set up a substitute. I think it's wise here switching out so that you can bring your Intrepid Sword ability back in later on, and bringing that Amoonguss into play certainly was a very disruptive Pokemon from Meaghan here.
Yeah, Tapu Fini once again going for the Nature's Madness, but this time onto the Incineroar for Gavin after that Amoonguss comes in. It will activate that Citrus Berry though, so Incineroar eating its berry now after getting exactly the half HP drop there, while it goes for a parting shot onto the Incineroar on Meaghan's side. So Meaghan once again getting that attack drop onto her Incineroar and switching back out, possibly sending that Zacian right back in, getting that Intrepid Sword boost, putting it right back on the field, and maybe swapping sides, which it is. So that Zacian's gonna, come right back, not gonna worry about getting another Intimidate from this Incineroar for at least, another turn or so. While the Incineroar goes for a Flare Blitz, either one of these Pokemon's not gonna love it, but the Amoonguss here with that Aqua Berry is gonna take it much more comfortably than the Zacian with that 50% HP drop. The Amoonguss, though, does take well over a quarter of its health, so that is an absolutely massive amount of damage you can imagine without that Aqua Berry. And now this Amoonguss isn't going to be as comfortable using something like a Rage Powder.
Yeah, burning away that Aqua Berry quite literally, I think was really nice for that Incineroar, because even though it's taking some, I think, attack drops from the Intimidate, you want to be able to deal with that Amoonguss, but it's not going to be Incineroar to do that. The Sacred Sword coming out from the very speedy Zash, and they're able to pick up the KO against the Incineroar, and Meaghan no longer has that Pokemon to utilize. Icy Wind coming out though from that Tapu Fini, really nice way of kind of controlling the speed. You want to bring that Zacian down so the Groudon can come in and clean up when it rejoins the field.
Yeah, that speed drop is going to be absolutely massive for Meaghan, having that ability. The Pollen Puff, though, into the Zacian, going to boost up some of that HP that Zacian's lost from that Nature's Madness earlier in the game. Pollen Puff is one of those moves that is absolutely great with a Pokemon like Zacian, who uses Substitute. Gets a ton of HP back, allows it to get maybe another Substitute off, especially now knowing that Meaghan has this Nature's Madness, and it's something like that Muddy Water too. But this Groudon getting that Sun back up after the Sun just disappeared as well.
Yeah, perfect timing there for Meaghan to bring that Groudon into the fray. We've got to be wary of those speed drops here. Of course, Zacian having its HP brought back up is going to give it that little bit extra longevity on the battlefield, but if Meaghan can find a way to deal with this Amoonguss, then it's not going to matter if there's a Follow Me coming out or not. You're just going to be able to remove it from play. Of course, Amoonguss could be switching out here. It could give Gavin the opportunity to switch up one of his Pokemon here, bringing that Incineroar back in, which is exactly what we can see happening, just to throw an Intimidate down against that Groudon and have the fake up pressure going on to the next turn, meaning Zacian could have the opportunity to come back in safely.
Yeah, that Intimidate is absolutely huge, along with that Fake Out. Amoonguss goes for a Protect here, so not going to want to take any damage from something like that Heat Crash. Tapu Fini goes for the Nature's Madness into that Incineroar slot once again, so that is still going to be doing a really good chunk of damage now that it doesn't have a Citrus Berry to eat. Groudon free to get its own Substitute out, which is really great, a really nice play, especially now that Zacian's left the field and can't attack it, so it can get this turn of Substitute set up for free without immediately losing it.
Yeah, this is very nice here for Meaghan. Getting that Groudon into Substitute just does protect it that little bit more, and particularly against both these Pokemon that aren't the most physically offensive to Groudon, and it does just allow Groudon the safety to go for those Precipice Blades. And Gavin at the same time doesn't have the luxury of being able to go for a hard switch safely. That Zacian comes in and catches the Precipice Blade is going to put it in a very difficult situation. And again, loving the setup here from Meaghan, putting that Venusaur back on the field where it wants to be, next to the Groudon in the sun, and with the Misty Terrain gone.
Yeah, that Precipice Blades from that substituted Groudon does come out and should connect with this Incineroar here. Won't hit through that protected Amoonguss is enough to knock it out though, so it's not going to be worrying anymore about those cycling Intimidates and those Fake Outs coming in from that Incineroar now that it is off the field, and it won't be as much of a problem for either of the Pokemon on Meaghan's side. You know, the Rillaboom could come in and that could still be a bit of a problem here, but the Zacian instead, it's going to have to at least fight through one substitute here. It does get that Intrepid Sword boost, but now that this, the Venusaur is on the field, it can pretty comfortably, if it wants to, get something like that Weather Ball off, get it into that Zacian slot now that it's going fast with that Chlorophyll ability. And that Groudon can get something like a Precipice Blades off, especially if that Zacian goes for a substitute now that its speed is back to normal.
Yeah, this is certainly excellent here for Meaghan. Like you mentioned, getting that Weather Ball off in the sun is going to be turning into a Fire-type move and actually targeting down into that opposing Zacian. Not going to be able to pick up a KO against it though, but not removing that Amoonguss from the field either. Zacian is going to go for the Behemoth Blade, targeting down into possibly that Venusaur just to remove it from play, but instead it's going to be that substitute trying to break it and expose the Groudon to maybe something coming out from this Amoonguss, something like a Spore to shut it down, would just be able to negate that offensive pressure and protect the Zacian. But Groudon, of course, moving first, going for that Heat Crash into Amoonguss does just absolutely remove it from play.
Yeah, the Amoonguss there not loving taking a Heat Crash here. That Groudon, of course, really, really strong, especially now that it has that Zacian without its partner to, Pollen Puff it back into a substitute range.
Exactly, and this has worked out perfectly here for Meaghan. You see the battle has been cancelled here, and Meaghan's able to push it through to a game 3, which is always really exciting. And one thing we credited in game 1 was kind of Gavin's ball positioning, but certainly in that game 2, Meaghan was able to capitalize on that as well, particularly in the end game, just making sure that the Groudon was where she wanted it to be, and having that Venusaur coming in the sun to apply pressure, I thought was really well played.
Yeah, Zacian's one of those Pokemon that when you're playing against her, you have to worry exactly about your positioning. If you've got an Intimidate user like a Incineroar that can use something like a U-turn or a Parting Shot to come in and out, that's great. Landorus with that U-turn as well. It's a Pokemon that when you have the ability to get those Intimidates off, you really need to pay attention and preserve the Pokemon on your team that can do that for you. It's something that if you're running a Zacian team, you have to be really comfortable with switching your Pokemon. You can't get too attached to the Pokemon that are on the field, you know, especially if you feel like your positioning could be better without them. I love the way that Gavin, you know, even though he lost in that first game, I love the way he changed his positioning up for the second game, and I love the Pokemon that he brought, especially, you know, bringing that Amoonguss. One thing I'm seeing, though, this Venusaur doesn't have Sleep Powder, and I've been saying Sleep Powder the whole time. This Venusaur is running Weather Ball, Sludge Bomb, and I believe Grass Knot, and then Protect. So we haven't seen that, so it isn't going to be putting anybody else to sleep. It's not worrying about that misty terrain.
Well, I'm glad you spotted it, because it was something I missed as well. I think always trying to be on the sort of spectator, non-spectator mode that we've got, we always try and not sort of sneak peek, but great reveal there, and that's something that, you know, Gavin has potentially maybe figured out. And you mentioned earlier that Meaghan does have to be careful of having that misty terrain up with that Venusaur, and that actually solves a lot of problems if you just don't put Sleep Powder on your Venusaur.
Yeah, the leads here, though, from Gavin, you have the Zacian and the Incineroar, getting that Intimidate off once again onto the Groudon. While for Meaghan, she has the Groudon and the Venusaur once again with the Sun. A very common lead, you know, that White Herb not worrying about that Intimidate turn 1, but then it's gone for the rest of the game. So Meaghan has to change her positioning, possibly, if this Incineroar swaps in and swaps out.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't be surprised to see that at all, because Incineroar, you need to have its capability for those Intimidates. But if you're Meaghan here, you're in this nice situation again where you can apply some great physical pressure with the Precipice Blades. No switches though, no Precipice Blades either, as Fake Out does go down into the Groudon from Incineroar.
Yeah, a second Fake Out critical hit here for this set. While the Venusaur immediately goes for a Weather Ball into the Zacian, that is going to do a really good chunk of damage. It is not enough to knock out like we saw the last game. It is really close. I wonder if it's a roll on that damage. Zacian instead going for a Behemoth Blade, so a very offensive turn 1 from the Pokemon on both sides here into the Venusaur slot is enough to knock that Venusaur out, though after that Fake Out. You got to wonder if that critical hit... Sorry, never mind. The critical hit was into Groudon, so my bad. But that one-hit knockout onto the Venusaur is absolutely huge.
Well, it was a live full brute core, so you're right, it was some chip damage on there as well that could potentially have been really pivotal there, but removing the Venusaur from play certainly does give Gavin a very early Pokemon advantage, and of course it allows Meaghan the opportunity to bring in the Incineroar to start applying pressure to that Zacian, because not only have you intimidated it, but you can go for the Fake Out into it. I think any kind of Breath of Flame will just blow it over at this point, and Incineroar certainly is sitting vulnerable to a potential Precipice Blades. Again, Meaghan can capitalize on, you know, trying to preserve that Groudon and reset sort of any damage against it, and you know, you can use that Incineroar as well to apply some great pressure to whatever Pokemon could come into the back, as we know that Gavin does have 2 grass type Pokemon, so I think going for a potential Flare Blitz into that slot could be excellent.
Yeah, instead that Amoonguss here switches in for the Zacian, and then the Rillaboom comes in for the Incineroar. So 2 Pokemon that you don't want to see against 2 Pokemon with strong fire type moves on the opposing side of the field, but that Grassy Surge coming up is going to be helpful, especially if, you know, maybe this Incineroar, these Pokemon, you know, take a little bit of damage. The Fake Out, though, from the Incineroar, not going to be doing a whole lot in terms of positioning, just because both these Pokemon have swapped in and can't use a move, but the Groudon going for a substitute after this Grassy Terrain switches is a move I absolutely love.
Yeah, again, love this play here from Meaghan, being able to set up that substitute, really capitalizing on the fact that Gavin was in a bit of a predicament there, would be forced to make a couple of switches, and if you can get that substitute up, we've seen how critical it can be in both games 1 and in game 2. Again, Amoonguss now in a position where it can try and redirect away some damage from that Rillaboom, but with the substitute up, Meaghan certainly is in a good position.
Yeah, the Rage Powder there from the Amoonguss will break the substitute on the Groudon, while will prevent the Groudon from going for a Heat Crash into the Rillaboom, but the Rillaboom broke the substitute with a Grassy Glide. That Occa Berry once again for the Amoonguss, but this Heat Crash is going to do a ton of damage, does well over half, even with the Occa Berry, so that shows exactly how strong this move would have been. The parting shot, though, into the Amoonguss from that Rage Powder as well, bringing this Incineroar out, possibly going to bring it back in later once that Zacian comes back on the field and isn't going to want to deal with an Intimidate.
Yeah, it's really important to be preserving that Incineroar there so that you can use it a little bit later on, throw that Intimidates around, Fake Out support as well. And Tappy Thinny's going to join the field here for Meaghan. Again, this just stops the Amoonguss from getting up to any kind of Spore shenanigans. It also stops the Rillaboom from going for priority Grassy Glides here, and can potentially give that Groudon a little bit more breathing room. But Groudon definitely doesn't want to stay in the face of that Rillaboom, so if Meaghan's got a way to start really sort of pressuring that Rillaboom, possibly you could even bring the Incineroar back in just to throw down another Intimidate at this point, just to make sure that Groudon is able to survive and pick up a KO with the Fire type move. That could be a potential option, and I think it looks like Meaghan's going for it.
Yeah, that Incineroar swapping back in for that Tapu Fini who it just came out for. Once again, getting Intimidate off onto this Rillaboom and to this Amoonguss as well, and getting that Fake Out pressure once again. Amoonguss, though, coming back for Gavin, bringing out his own Incineroar, so something that would be much more comfortable taking a Fire-type move if Meaghan went for it, and if she was predicting for a Rage Powder, may have targeted with a Fire-type attack into the Incineroar on Gavin's side, who also gets the Intimidate off. Groudon goes for the Heat Crash, though. This isn't to the Rillaboom, and we saw that this did a ton of damage, but that Intimidate, I think, was absolutely massive, not getting that knockout, while the Grassy Glide into the Groudon does a pretty good chunk as well.
Yeah, Rillaboom being able to survive there is fantastic for Gavin. The unfortunate thing, though, is how much damage that Grassy Glide was able to do. You know, you don't have the terrain, you're taking some Intimidate, and Groudon was able to hang on, but it does look like one more of those is actually going to be enough to pick up the KO against that opposing Groudon if Incineroar's able to chip away at it as well. I wouldn't be surprised to see a few more switches coming around here as the players start to position their Pokemon towards that endgame situation. But if you're Meaghan, I think you're going to want to try and pick up a KO here as well. Unfortunately, it would give Gavin the opportunity to bring in a Pokemon from the back, but you need to start picking up those KOs and start pushing towards the endgame state.
Yeah, Gavin brings that Rillaboom back and brings out his Amoonguss, while Meaghan swaps her Groudon out and brings out her Tapu Fini, that last Pokemon that she's bringing with her to this match. The Incineroar goes for the Fake Out into the Tapu Fini slot on Meaghan's side, so not going to be able to stop any big damage, but the Flare Blitz from the Incineroar here is going to go into the Amoonguss slot, which will not handle this and gets knocked out. So that does get that knockout, like you said, for Meaghan, and gets that Amoonguss off of the field, which I think is absolutely huge, because now they'll be able to target the Zacian without fear of Rage Powder.
Yeah, that was one thing that Gavin was able to utilize really well, was that kind of Zacian Amoonguss on the battlefield. And like you mentioned, that removing it does just mean that Zacian is going to be a little bit more exposed. It's not going to be able to dodge out of the way of those fire type or ground type moves coming out from the Groudon. But the one thing it has got to its advantage is it's come in here, got its Intrepid Sword boost, and doesn't have to worry about taking an Intimidate. You might have to worry about taking a potential parting shot, though, however, that's just going to bring that attack stat down to neutral. But in all honesty, if you're Meaghan, I would be just trying to pick up the KO against the Zacian here. Stop worrying about the stats, just pick it up, as it is in such low HP range.
Yeah, and she doesn't have that Fake Out either on her side now that that Incineroar is already in and already went for a Flare Blitz against the Amoonguss. So it is going to have to see exactly if she can get a move off like that Flare Blitz, or if that Zacian's going to be able to go for something like a Behemoth Blade. But instead it goes for a Protect, not attacking that Tapu Fini with the Behemoth Blade like we saw last game. Moonblast into the Zacian does not attack because of that Protect. Incineroar goes for a Parting Shot, though, into Meaghan's Tapu Fini. And so that will send Gavin's Incineroar back. I almost thought that that was a side parting shot for a second, which would have been really interesting. Not really a play that you would typically see, though, between a Tapu Fini, while the Rillaboom instead comes back out for the Incineroar on Gavin's side, changing the terrain again, getting that Grassy Glide priority back.
Yeah, and Rillaboom coming in here, able to apply a lot of pressure to that Tapu Fini going forward, and Incineroar is going to give it one parting shot as it does jump out of the fray. And again, Meaghan putting the Incineroar into the back means you can bring it again forward, intimidate, and really apply pressure to that opposing Zacian. I think this is where Meaghan needs to be really, really careful. You have to preserve your Incineroar to apply pressure to that opposing Zacian at this stage. You need to protect your Pokemon from taking as much damage as possible. And the problem we've got here now is the Groudons come in, the Rillaboom, sure, it's at -1, but it can still apply enough pressure in the grassy terrain to pick up a KO against that Groudon. It's also got the Fake Out pressure as well, so it can potentially try and stop Groudon, while Zacian maybe wants to try and pick up a KO and clean up a little bit here, and then Rillaboom will still have that offensive pressure going forward. Even if Incineroar wants to come in and go for another Intimidate in the grassy terrain, it's still going to be a formidable threat.
Yeah, absolutely. But then you have to realize, too, both the Pokemon on Gavin's side are faster than this Groudon, so this Groudon's going to have to do something to not take this damage, and it does switch out, bringing the Incineroar in. With that Tapu Fini on the field, it could go for something like an Icy Wind and slow down these Pokemon on Gavin's side, just allowing Meaghan's side to be a little bit faster to get those Precipice Blades off before having that damage. Zacian goes for the Sacred Sword, though, into the Tapu Fini slot, possibly predicting a switch there. Does not do a whole lot of damage. Tapu Fini does go for the Icy Wind here, though. Gonna lower the speed of both of the opponent's Pokemon, and they both have very little HP, but it doesn't do a whole lot, especially after that parting shot, and lowers the speed of both of the Pokemon. So maybe if Meaghan can get another parting shot off and come back with the Groudon, would do an absolutely huge amount of damage. The U-turn, though, from the Rillaboom into the Tapu Fini for Gavin is going to send that back and bring his own Incineroar back into the game as well.
Yeah, I mean, the icy wind, really great to see. We saw how well that worked for Meaghan previously, just being able to apply that speed pressure to reducing the speed of that Zacian critically, so that Pokemon like the Groudon can come in and apply a lot of offensive pressure. You know, if you have the Groudon on the field now, it would be great for Meaghan being able to pick up the KO solidly against Zacian and deal a significant chunk to that opposing Incineroar. And I think towards the end of this game 3, both players are kind of playing a very similar game in the sense that they're throwing down these intimidates, they're throwing down parting shots, they're making sure that speed now is being manipulated as well, so that it's forcing the opponent to make those switches so that you can reset all of those stat drops. And it's going to come down, I think, to which player is going to be able to identify their opponent's switches and capitalize on it the most. And this is where things can get very risky, particularly when the Pokemon are at low HP. You can see the Zacian there. We know the Groudon isn't too healthy in the back for Meaghan. You don't want to bring in your Pokemon and have it KO'd for no victory.
Yeah, Gavin's Incineroar goes for the fake out onto Meaghan's Incineroar, and then a Sacred Sword onto Meaghan's Incineroar as well. Knocks it down into the 25% or less HP range, but it is able to eat its Citrus Berry and survive. So another Icy Wind from Tapu Fini here is going to lower these Pokemon speeds even more, and just do that little extra tiny amount of chip damage that I think is still being negated by that grassy terrain on the field. But lowering the speed of these Pokemon, especially getting the Zacian down to -2, I think is going to really change the game for Meaghan.
Yeah, just trying to negate that Zacian as much as possible, and then you can possibly capitalize on it being able to switch out because it's got such low HP as well. Incineroar, however, on Gavin's side, you know, regaining its HP all the way back up here thanks to its kind of grassy terrain recovery. And I think this is where both these players, in all honesty, they need to start going on the offensive here, start dealing out damage, particularly on the Pokemon where the HP has been dwindled. If you're Gavin, for example, and you can predict the Groudon coming in and try and pick up a KO against it at this point, that could really swing the game in his favor.
Yeah, the Groudon does come in though, and the Zacian on Gavin's side goes for a Protect, so it's not going to want to take any moves from the Incineroar on Meaghan's side that is now faster than it, and it does not take that Flare Blitz now through that Protect. The Incineroar goes for a Parting Shot though into Meaghan's Incineroar, so maybe trying to, you know, lower the amount of damage that Incineroar can do, and sending itself back in, getting his Rillaboom back out on the field, getting more Fake Out pressure, and of course getting that Intimidate in for later. So it really is very cyclical with the Pokemon that we're seeing switching in and out. This Zacian is still in the game. This Rillaboom is not doing a whole lot of, you know, doesn't have a whole lot of HP left, so it may only be here just to get sacked and just to bring that Incineroar back.
Yeah, of course, though, the Rillaboom is able to apply a huge amount of pressure to that opposing Groudon, and I think this is where we are starting to see those interactions a little bit more, particularly when the speed has been reduced down. You know, the Incineroar on Meaghan's side is moving that little bit faster, meaning the Incineroar on Gavin's side was able to switch out a little bit later, bringing the Rillaboom in rather safely as opposed to having that risk of taking a Fire-type move. Meaghan, however, going to switch things up as well, bringing the Incineroar back into its Pokeball and Tapu Fini out into the fray to just overwrite that terrain and make the Rillaboom a little less formidable in the face of the Groudon.
I love this play. Tapu Fini coming in, getting that Misty Surge back up, preventing a Grassy Glide into this Groudon. The Zacian has to come back now that it's slower than the Groudon that it is on the field, and it brings out Gavin's own Incineroar, so having that Fake Out pressure again from both of the Pokemon on this side. So this, if this was this Grassy Glide, you know, it could be a really nice move here, but it is instead that Fake Out onto the Groudon, so that Groudon isn't going to be able to do any damage this turn, and it does lose that Sun, so that is a bit of a problem if they are trying to go for something like a Heat Crash, but I love that play.
I mean, this can be a really big turn now as well, because Incineroar's coming for Gavin. Again, Fake Out pressure is here on the field, and Rillaboom can apply, you know, it can switch out, it can come back in, and that Groudon can again apply a lot of offensive pressure with something like the Precipice Blades. So depending on how these players want to kind of pivot Pokemon or pick up KOs is going to be critical. The Fake Out once again goes into Groudon, so it can't do anything, and Tapu Fini's able to go for the Moonblast into Rillaboom, which is going to be enough to pick up the KO against it. So brilliant there from Meaghan being able to remove the biggest threat to the Groudon here. But this again gives Gavin the opportunity to bring that Zacian back into the fray.
Yeah, but the Zacian coming in and is, you know, gonna have to deal with maybe an Incineroar in the back from Meaghan, and Gavin can't rotate any more Pokemon, you know? That's it. That's his last Fake Out. So now that he knows, you know, now Meaghan knows if she can get this Groudon out, maybe get another Icy Wind or something as well from this Tapu Fini and slow the Pokemon down.
Yeah, certainly. It's a great position here for Meaghan to be in when you sort of call it out like that. Like you said, the Icy Wind having the potential to bring down the speed of those Pokemon, meaning that if Groudon could get in and find its mark with the Precipice Blades, always a little bit of a risk, it could be trying to get some solid KOs. And the threat of not having Intimidate anymore, because Incineroar is one of Gavin's last two remaining Pokemon, and also just, you know, being able to kind of throw an Intimidate of your own across the field as well is a little bit of insult to injury here, but just does negate the offensive pressure. Pokemon have, but oh, what a calculation. Zacian gets a substitute up.
Yeah, the substitute there for the Zacian with barely a sliver of HP left, but the Icy Wind slows down both of these Pokemon here. That is a really big substitute. I did not think that there was enough HP left for one, but then again, we can't see the numbers like Gavin can. And a Flare Blitz into the Incineroar on Meaghan's side from the Incineroar on Gavin's side, so just doing a little bit more damage, but that Icy Wind's going to be absolutely pivotal, especially if Meaghan can slow down both Pokemon enough, maybe get enough chip damage with this Icy Wind to deal with the Pokemon on Meaghan's side and maybe break that substitute. The fake out for Meaghan though into Gavin's opposing Incineroar is going to be huge, but the Sacred Sword here is enough to knock out the Incineroar on Meaghan's side.
Yeah, that substitute honestly had me a little bit speechless, not gonna lie. Did not see that coming, couldn't think it was possible. The Muddy Water's gonna come out from Tapu Fini though, does a decent chunk to that opposing Incineroar, taking it down to below 50% here. Going down into that opposing Zacian. It doesn't look like it has broken a substitute. It does, however, do a little bit of trouble to the opposing accuracy on that Incineroar, as well as proccing the berries so that the Incineroar no longer has that to utilize.
Yeah, still as good as I think you can get without breaking that substitute. So Groudon switches in here for Meaghan. Hopefully going to be able to get something like a P-Blades off onto these Pokemon, but it does have to contend with the fact that Zacian is still under its substitute, so maybe a Protect here and then something like another Muddy Water just to break that substitute, and then the next turn you can go for something like a P-Blades.
Exactly. If you're Meaghan now, you just want to break that substitute, leaving both of Gavin's Pokemon vulnerable to a Precipice Blades. Of course, you then do have to cross your fingers that the Precipice Blades does connect. If Groudon was maybe in a healthier situation, you could maybe go for something like a Heat Crash into the Zacian or just anything other than Precipice Blades to risk it. But we have seen a lot of accuracy on that Precipice Blades. I really hope I have not just commentated to curse that situation. Worse things have happened and more mysterious things have happened, but Groudon in this turn just going to go for a Protect, probably just psyching itself up, ready for what it knows it needs to do to close out the set.
Yeah, Zacian going for Behemoth Blade into the Tapu Fini, predicting that Protect there from the Groudon. So this Behemoth Blade is going to have to get this knockout here onto the Tapu Fini, which it does not even really come close to. So it is going to probably go for a double target just to get this Tapu Fini off of the field. But the Moonblast instead goes into the Zacian slot here, and that should be enough after all of this to break that substitute. It is. And so now this means that, the Groudon is going to be one of the faster things on the field. Incineroar goes for a Flare Blitz into this Tapu Fini slot as well. But this Tapu Fini still hangs on pretty strong, but it won't survive, I believe, one more Behemoth Blade. So they have to, get the P-Blades hit on both Pokemon to win.
Exactly, definitely very vulnerable HP bars for Meaghan here. This is where things get so intense, and it's why I'm glad I'm this side of the desk and not where the players are at all. It's that kind of anticipation. But Groudon actually trying to go for a double protect there and failing as Zacian goes for the Behemoth Blade here, jumping out into the fray, down into the Groudon with the Behemoth Blade, going to be able to pick up the KO. Possibly one more Icy Wind was needed to put the speed tiers into, where Meaghan needed it to be, as Tapu Fini goes for the Muddy Water. However, Muddy Water could be the saving grace here. It will pick up the KO against the Zacian, do a decent chunk to the Incineroar, and lower that accuracy once again. But in all honesty, Tapu Fini needs that Sun to go away before it can deal really good damage to that opposing Incineroar.
Oh, but that accuracy drop is absolutely huge here. That Incineroar now with -2 accuracy doesn't connect on that Flare Blitz. Meaghan has to check exactly how many more turns of Sun she has to see, what she can do here. Moonblast here as well. Going to be great single target damage onto this Incineroar. You have to hope, and you get the special attack drop, which, Meaghan's just getting all of the drops today. Flare Blitz does connect, though, from Gavin's Incineroar onto the Tapu Fini, but it's not enough to get the knockout. This is absolutely huge. This has just been an absolutely insane game 3. One more Moonblast here should hopefully do it. Should knock out Gavin's Incineroar here, and that will be game 3 for Meaghan. Oh my gosh.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I am speechless at that particular turn of events. I mean, fantastic play there from Meaghan, and well done to Tapu Fini as well, being able to survive. I think the other unfortunate thing for Gavin there was obviously the Flare Blitz is going to be doing recoil to that Incineroar, so its HP was just being chipped away left, right, and center. Even if it was able to connect its Flare Blitzes that weren't dealing a lot of the damage to Tapu Fini, it was going to have to take some damage in return. But just what amazing play there. Meaghan was able to really set up perfectly, see every opportunity, every out, and just be able to capitalize on it. Amazing play.
Absolutely amazing. That Muddy Water is a move that is either the bane of your existence or it's your savior in a match. It's those accuracy drops can be completely critical, especially if, that Incineroar might have been fishing for a critical hit with a Flare Blitz onto a Tapu Fini, especially after that Zacian was knocked out by that Muddy Water and that Tapu Fini was free to go for Moonblast. But what adjustments from each player in each game, consistent positioning from both players. You have to pay attention to who's got the Intimidate, who's got the Fake Out, who's got the Intrepid Sword Boost, where do you go from here? So, I mean, the mindfulness of both of the players to keep track of every Pokemon on the field and in the back of what they have and what they can move around to change their board position that's some of the smartest Pokemon that you can play. And that's something that I love to see from two high-level players like this, is just the mindfulness of what they have going.
Yeah, it's very intense, not only trying to figure out what you need to do with the full Pokemon on the field, but then with the remaining Pokemon in the back and 3 turns ahead, and then the end game state, and which Pokemon do I need to counteract this? And I think both players demonstrated that really well, and I have to really credit as well kind of Gavin being able to utilize both the Rillaboom and the Incineroar, both Pokemon that have that Fake Out. Also, there's terrain options we can throw in there and abilities, and those two Pokemon in combination have almost every kind of checklist, as it were, like every tick on that kind of Pokemon book, and to be able to utilize them the way he did magnificently, and just unfortunately not able to take the set, but still a great game of Pokemon to behold.
Yeah, that was an incredibly close game. Both games were, there was nothing in the games until the very end. And even at the very end of some of the games, I still didn't know what would happen because, sometimes a critical hit can make or break a game, but super close. Both of these players play at such a high level. And that does put it, I believe, at 3-3 for the United States and Australia. So now, they're at that tiebreaker point where the next one to win gets bare minimum a draw. So, whichever players still haven't played or still haven't reported their matches yet, they've got their whole week in their hands, and whoever has to play New Zealand next is going to be in a bit of a tougher spot if they lose. Yeah. So, especially in those three team groups at the very bottom half of the draw there. So, just awesome Pokemon. It gets me so excited weekends like this where there's so much great Pokemon to play. And I mean, tough watching Gavin lose for the United States, but it was an entertaining game to watch nonetheless.
Yeah, the competition is definitely holding up, particularly, like you say, in those smaller groups. But that's all we've got time for on today's broadcast. We've showcased our 4 amazing matches, and we will, of course, be back next week as well for some more Pokemon action. So make sure that you are following Victory Road on Twitter to keep an update on when all the streams are, when all the matches are, and, of course, subscribe to their YouTube as well, because that's where they showcase all the amazing matches. And I believe there are ones on there as well that weren't necessarily on the stream. I might be incorrect, but either way, go watch. There's lots of great stuff on there. So that's it from us here at the World Cup by Victory Road, sponsored by the amazing Elgato, and hopefully we will see you guys here again next week.